Hello. Welcome to the Hidden Gifts of Lost podcast. And I'm so happy you are listening today. I have Susan Schmitt Winchester as my guest, and a little about her. She has quite an impressive bio. She's a distinguished innovative HR leader with over 36 years of corporate experience. She's also the co-author of Healing at Work, a keynote speaker, executive coach, and HR. She is passionate about teaching people how to break through unconscious beliefs and patterns that lead to burnout, overwhelm, worry, and stress in their workplaces, and discover greater self-acceptance and fulfillment in both work and life. And we're going to talk about her book today. And I also just have to say how I met Susan, because it's one of those things you can't make up. So we knew each other from the community. We've seen each other in multiple Zooms, right? And then we both did our TEDx last November in Cincinnati, and there were 8 of us. And like of all the 8 people in the world who could have done a TEDx that day, it was like, wait a minute, I know you.
Hey,
So
this workout. I
yeah.
still can't believe that. That was crazy coincidence.
Absolutely. So Susan's going to share the loss that led to this hidden gift of her work and her mission and passion. And Susan, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so happy to have you, and nice to see you again.
Such a pleasure. I know it's so nice to see you as well. I always love your purple hair. It just makes me smile when I see you. And yeah, so gosh, I don't even know where to begin. Where should I start?
Right before we turned this on, Susan was telling me that today would be her sister's 60th birthday.
Yeah.
And so much of came because of the loss of her sister.
Right.
And when you reached out to me, you said you were ready to talk about your sister.
Yeah.
And so why don't tell us about your book and your work.
I grew up, I had a younger sister, Nancy, who was 18 months younger than me. So, excuse me. And we were very different. She was more introverted, quiet. I was extroverted. The one thing we had in common was horses. So that brought us together. I remember I had just gone off to college in 1981. So I'd graduated from high school in 81. I was going off as a freshman. And right as I was heading off to go into my freshman, my sister was diagnosed with 4-stage Hodgkin's disease. And it was really quite shocking because the only symptoms that she had that heaviness in her chest and night sweats. And so that was obviously quite a shocking discovery.
Yeah.
It's me going into college, starting a whole new world. It was really crazy and chaotic. That was in 1981. And so for 10 years, she really fought a very gallant battle against cancer. She went into remission a couple of times. My mom, who is amazing, was a nurse. And so my mom was very much key to her treatment and everything that was going on. And eventually Nancy went for a bone marrow transplant. She was her own autologous bone marrow donor. And that kept her in remission. And she had a really high quality of life for a couple of years. But then the cancer came back. And it was literally 10 years later in 1991. And we knew that it was really the end. It was really clear being diagnosed 4-stage Hodgkin's that long ago. There wasn't a whole lot more that they could do for her. And I remember I'm always a little reluctant to get into all the details because there's some fairly gory details as part of the story. But I was living in Chicago. So I graduated from college and graduate school, was living in Chicago. And my mom called me on a Friday and said, "You need to come home. I think this is the weekend she's going to pass."
Okay.
She had stopped breathing on that Friday. So I immediately packed up my things and drove back to my hometown. And so that was Friday, then into Saturday. Saturday was somewhat of a confusing day. I remember sort of around dinner time, 5 o'clock that Saturday, my sister was laying in a bed in my mom's little farmhouse. So my mom had been her caretaker for the last 9 or 10 months or whatever it was. And my sister asked to have my dad come over, and she wanted to talk to all of us. And so he came, and she was so small and frail. She was so little, laying in my mom's family room. But she talked like a wise prophet. And she said things that my mom and I didn't really understand. But one of the things she said, "When I die, I want you to separate my ashes into 3 parts so that you can each basically deal with my death in whatever way you need to. And my dad got very angry. No, no, no. We need to be a family. This is the time to come together. And she said, no, Dad, this is my wish. And then she turned to my dad and she said, Dad, I want you to have my favorite stuffed animal. It was a little mouse named Maury. And she said, you need to heal. You need to heal. And of course, I didn't know really what she was talking about. She was 26 at this point. I was 27 or 28. And when I thought about my past childhood, a lot of people had far worse childhoods than I did. But the piece that I was managing, my sister and I were managing, my mom, was my dad's unpredictable anger. It could be very quickly triggered. And it was very scary. And he was a big guy. And so when he was angry, he'd come charging at me. And of course, as a little girl, it was overwhelmingly threatening.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, well, maybe she's talking to him about he needs to heal his anger. Anyway, he left. We went about the evening. And early in the evening, my mom went to give her some more medication for pain. And she said, no, I don't want any more medication. In fact, I think she asked for it might have been a reduced amount. She didn't want the full amount of the painkiller. My mom honored that. And then around 11 p.m., my mom and I were sitting in the living room, and it was like Nancy started to have a conversation, but it wasn't with us. She was talking, and we just thought maybe she's just processing some things before she passes. So this is going on from like 11 o'clock. 1 o'clock in the morning, I went up to go to the bathroom, and I was coming back into the family room, and I heard her say, Daddy, don't touch me there. Daddy, don't touch me there. And I sat down with my mom and I said, what did she just say? And my mom started to cry and she said, I think your sister may have been sexually abused by your dad. And what happened for the next several hours was literally her releasing. I think it was all repressed. And so she went through a process of releasing the pain, but it was like watching a horror movie because here's this little frail body that's probably 85 pounds kicking and screaming and trying to kick him off of her during this experience. And she's screaming and crying and yelling, get off of me, get off of me. And I don't want to go to hell. I think he must have said something to her. If you tell anybody, you could go to hell. And, you know, my mom and I are just sitting there stunned, crying, watching this horrific event unfold before us. And then slowly, I mean, we could literally hear her bones breaking. That's how she was so riddled with cancer. Ah, oh my gosh. That it was, I mean, it was honestly, it was the most horrific experience of my life to witness that. And as her body started to give out and she started to calm down, I was on one side of the bed holding her hand. My mom was on the other side. And I saw her and I said, or I was looking at her and I said, Nancy, you are not going to hell. God loves you. And then it was almost like I felt this warmth of God's love everywhere in the room. I mean, it was such a beautiful moment because I felt like she could see God. I said, you see God, don't you? And she got this smile on her face. And it was like a moment of grace. And then she took her last breath and she passed. And then my mom and I sat there, of course, crying for, you know, I don't even know how much longer. It's like 3 or 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
And my mom said, I figured it out. I figured out when this was happening. I was working nights at the hospital as a nurse. She would work 11 to 7 at night. And so then, of course, we had to call my dad. And that was really scary. I was scared to death to do that. So she called him and she said, you know, just need to let you know that Nancy's passed, but here's what happened. And he started yelling. I could hear him yelling on the phone. And he hung up on her. And we thought, okay, I wonder what's going to happen. And so we kind of held our breath. He came to her farmhouse. Nancy's laying on the bed. And he literally walks right by her body and starts screaming and yelling, how dare you accuse me of this horrible thing? And anyway, we weren't sure what he was going to do, but he eventually left. The morgue came into her body to the hospital. But as you can imagine, I mean, it was a devastating, not only traumatic, but dramatic end of her life.
Yeah.
And it was, it was like, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, it's just almost hard to imagine that that happened. And I know that what unfolded after that was I didn't speak to him for 3 years. So here's all this pain, the loss of Nancy, my only sister, who was so special and so sweet, and so, loving and very quiet. She was quiet, but she was wise beyond her years. And it was a very difficult time after she passed. Obviously, we were in significant grief as a result of that. But over time, I felt compelled that I had to write down the story of the night she died. I just felt like God was saying, you need to write this down. And so I did. And I also felt like, you know what? There's something here. I'm supposed to write a book. I don't know what the book is. I don't know what the purpose of the book is, but I didn't really want to write a book. I didn't plan to write a book, but I felt like I was being compelled to write. And the foundation was her story of growing up and realizing that I had minimized a lot of the trauma dynamic going on in the home, the impact it had on my mom and my sister and me. And my dad, who I don't judge at all, I think he did the best he could. He had his childhood traumas. I know that his psychiatrist invited me to come and meet with her. So she shared a little bit about some of his own trauma. And it doesn't excuse what happened, but it helps set a context around it. But then what happened is over time, and it was over 13 years, I just started writing different stories of things that had happened, starting with her story. And then I had a lot of career stories of things that hadn't gone very well for me at work. I was like, you know this because you saw my TEDx talk. But in my TEDx talk, I talk about tackling perfectionism. But ultimately, underneath of that is all the underlying drivers of behaviors that we take on in the workplace that are really unhealthy, upsetting, personal, grounded in the loss of Nancy, but also professional as well, because there's such a close connection between the experiences we have when we're little and the experiences we have in our careers. And most of us, me included, you mentioned my 36-year career, 30 of my 30 years, my entire success was fueled by my underlying belief that I wasn't good enough because I felt like no matter what I did in relationship to my dad, he was always angry and scary and unpredictable. And, so the gifts, there's so many gifts. The first gift is that I had Nancy for 26 years of her life. And to know her, I feel her all the time. She was so special. So that's the first gift of the loss, just appreciating what she gave to me as my little sister. And while we didn't have a lot in common, we definitely had horses in common. And she always spoke truth to me. She was the only person in my whole life who ever said, you have a drinking problem. Yeah. And I denied that for many years. And then God basically stepped in. They called it a spiritual awakening and spoke to me one morning and said, you need to stop or you're going to hurt yourself or someone else. And I stopped. And 11 years I stopped without going to AA because I didn't want to admit I was an alcoholic. Yeah. And then a good friend of mine named John invited me to an AA meeting. And I went to my first meeting 11 years after hard knuckling, not drinking. A good friend basically, I called him. He'd been sober 20 years. And he said, you have to make an agreement with me. You have to call me anytime you want to drink before you drink. And so for those 11 years, I called Crystal Pack a lot. And anyway, it was a gift that my sister gave me that I denied and ignored, but she was right. And then the gift of understanding the significance of our childhood experiences and how much those experiences affected me in the workplace, leading to turning to alcohol to self-regulate, overworking, being a workaholic, always constantly trying to prove myself to other people, believing that everybody, particularly angry men in authority, that I was good, but never feeling like I measured up. And that ended up resulting in a manuscript that I wrote over 13 years. It was a very long journey. Very fortunate to have reconnected with a woman named Martha Finney, who became my co-author. And Martha, who has published 30 plus books and basically her business, had reconnected with me. We were talking. She said, well, send me your manuscript. I want to read it. I said, well, wait a minute. I need to pay you. No, just send it to me. And then the next morning, she wrote to me early in the morning, and she said, I just want you to know that I've been in Florida for 3 months at Airbnb, processing my extremely dysfunctional childhood. Her mom was a violent alcoholic. Her dad was a CIA agent, so they had all kinds of secrets here and there. And she said, I've been processing it for 3 months, and I feel like God's been preparing me to work with you. And we came together, and we spent another 2.5 more years after my 13 years of creating what became Healing at Work, our book, where we teach people basically how to use the workplace as a laboratory for emotional healing, especially during bumper car moments when we crash into one another at work and we get emotionally charged up. It's those moments that are often fueled from our past experiences when we were little. So many of my past experiences influenced by my angry dad that led to these unconscious beliefs. I'm not good enough. Everybody else gets to decide my worth. I have to be perfect. I have to be the people pleaser. Yeah. And I'm really lucky I'm not dead from alcohol, frankly. So those are all the gifts. That's not them.
Yeah.
I,
Oh,
I,
oh my God. That story. Oh,
ah, I know.
Susan. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
I'm like almost speechless and just actually really honored that you shared all that with me. I There's so many things in your story too that like I can totally relate to and resonate with, the angry father,
Yeah.
the perfectionism, just the not feeling good enough, toxicity in the workplace when I had a corporate job. And you're so spot on how all those things tie back into our childhoods. And
Yeah.
yet so many of us go through life with that drive and that perfectionism, and we don't even really realize the deep roots of where that comes from.
So true.
And people don't write books about the workplace, about the emotional stuff that's going on in the background, but that's informs every single day that we go to work. I was an insurance underwriter, and it wasn't one particular person who was toxic. It was the whole system. The systemic micromanagement is what I call it. And when I would walk into that building, I would feel literally like my soul was being crushed. And it was a hidden gift from my parents that I was able to leave that and be doing what I'm doing now, which is connecting with wonderful people like you and giving a place for a voice for these stories.
You said that
Wow.
really, really important, which is how all these things play out at work. I think it's important to note that our past influences what we think about ourselves. So I didn't think I was good enough. I had to prove myself every day. It influences how we interpret other people. And so if you were experiencing a micromanaging experience in your role as an insurance underwriter, you probably felt like somebody was putting a thumb on you. And my guess is there's probably some pattern from the past where somebody important was doing that to you. And so we have an overreaction and we go into our behavior response, which actually falls into categories of fight, flight, freeze, and please. So I was the pleaser. You might have been too. There's also the bully. We see the bully at work all the time. And then there are the people, the freezers, who do everything they can to stay off the radar. I worked with one woman years ago who told me, Susan, I've never spoken once first to anyone at this company for 30 years until someone speaks to me. And my heart just goes, oh my gosh, what a heavy pain that, talk about hiding. But a lot of people do it. They don't speak up. They stay quiet. They want to stay off the radar. And then there's the flight. People get tired of what they perceive to be toxicity in the workplace, which actually is fueled by their own past. Their experience is fueling it. And so they leave the company.
Yeah.
They believe that they aren't valued. I can't even tell you how many people get missed for a promotion and come to me and say, I'm leaving. The company doesn't value me. When in fact, it has nothing to do with that. In fact, many times we greatly value the person who thinks they're not valued. But the internal unconscious response being fueled from those past experiences when we were little become the driver of the bus. And I call it living the unconscious wounded career path, where we're
Wow.
completely unaware of how much our experience of work is influenced by our own past and our interpretations and stories and assumptions and beliefs and judgments that we carry about ourselves and others. It's like a stage every single day. I saw it every single day working with very talented, brilliant, complex people who are navigating these same issues. And I never understood it until Martha and I came together and really created the outcome of the book.
Oh my God. Yeah. See, you're just creating your inner reality.
Well, you are,
You
and
don't
you're
even know you're doing it you know.
doing it.
I
I
mean,
I had no idea that my anxiety about whether or not I was good enough, my overworking, my when I was at home, when my kids were little, being so focused on worried about work, I would neglect them because I was in my office working or I was ruminating about something I did or didn't do.
oh my gosh, that too. That could suck all your time on the weekends. And
Absolutely.
remember that. You're ruminating all weekend.
Absolutely. And that's the unconscious wounded career path. However, what I teach in the book with Martha's great work is you can step off that path anytime onto the conscious healing career path. And all this work came because of the traumatic death of Nancy. I would never have appreciated the level of dysfunctionality happening in the home because I minimized it. I rationalized it. I thought, oh, it's okay. I'm on to my next job.
And the fact that that could be going on all that time and that you and your mother didn't know.
No, I know. Exactly.
That's and I think that is actually, unfortunately, very common. And
It is.
what a gift that your sister's soul or was like, "No, we're gonna let this go in life. We're not taking this with us into the
Yep.
next life." I have chills. That's absolutely incredible.
It's amazing. I believe that it was exactly as God intended for it to be revealed, for her to be released, to go into the next stage of existence, of whatever the next adventure is. She let it all out. I mean, it was from the processing of it being at 11 p.m. and I think it ended around 3:30 in the mornings of literally a little broken body laying there with it completely released. And then to give the gift, both my mom and I were there. We were witnesses
Yeah, you brought
what happened. And if we hadn't both been there, if I hadn't written down every single detail, which is highlighted in the book, people would not believe it. My dad, you know, he's deceased now, but he, of course, was always in denial.
Mhm.
It was the drugs she was on. That was causing her to have hallucinations. Well, not when you see the details of what happened. It is very clear who she's talking to.
Okay.
It is very clear who she is fighting off of her.
Yeah.
I agree. It was a huge gift for her soul to release that before she went into God's arms.
I wonder if the cancer, was related to what was going
Oh,
on. I'm sure. Yeah.
absolutely.
She's trying to process all of that and her being, you that your body,
Absolutely.
yeah, carries all of that. Oh my God, your sister. Wow.
I don't know if you're familiar, you may be, a lot of people are not, with the research that the Kaiser Permanente organization and the Centers for Disease Control did back in the late 90s, where they went out and they asked 17,000 adults in the US if they had experienced any of these, what they called adverse childhood events, referred to as the ACEs.
Damn.
And all they ask people to do is check which ones you've experienced before the age of 18. And I won't be able to repeat them all, but it's things like physical, emotional abuse, physical and emotional neglect, incarceration of a parent, addiction in the home, mother treated badly, sort of 10 really big T traumas. And the work was led by two doctors, I think it's Felipe, and were shocked when they got the results back that indicated that nearly 67% of the people they asked indicated they had experienced at least one of those ACEs. 40% experienced two. And then there's those of us like me who experience five or more. I think the percent is like 13%. So you think about all the people going into the workplace, wanting to go in and do a good job, carrying all this shit with them.
Yeah. No wonder.
Unconsciously.
Yeah. No wonder we're crashing into each other.
We are. The motor car ones happen all the time. All the time. We do something that upsets somebody, and all of a sudden we're upset because they're mad at us or judging us or rejecting us, or we're afraid we're going to get fired, or we do something. I mean, it is like a constant bumper car experience in the workplace.
And we're spending so much of our lives in the workplace. So tell me a little bit more about bumper car moments and how do you teach people to work with this and
Yeah.
to heal?
Yep. It's a great question. So, anytime in the workplace where you have that emotionally strong, it can be referred to as being triggered, hooked, activated. They're different words, but when you are upset. For me, we often feel it in our bodies someplace. I feel it in my chest, like an elephant sitting on me. That's how my anxiety shows up. It's like an elephant sitting on me. My heart rate starts to go up. My nervous system's in high alert. It's in the constant state of hypervigilance. And this is what happens to everybody at work when something goes wrong. We perceive something is not right. And the vision I get is this spiral down into a place of suffering. And feeling all those emotional responses, depression, sad, rejected, afraid, anxious, whatever. And it's those moments, those bumper car crashes, when you start to feel that physiological response is a clue to say, oh, my reaction is very likely being fueled from something in the past. And it's really important to understand, and Mark and I go into quite a lot of detail on this in the understanding how the brain works, the research around neuroplasticity, which is all about how you can rewire the neural pathways in your brain. So when we're little, we take in all this information and data about what's going on around us, and we start to believe certain things about ourselves and other people. And those pathways become very ingrained. They can be rewired. They can be reprogrammed. So when you feel that emotional response, like, uh-oh, high alert, everything's bad, I'm going to get fired, this is a terrible place, I hate my boss, that is the moment to say, okay, I'm going to practice. I call it the rapid power reclaim. It's a simple 3-step process to reclaim your power. Because what's happening in the brain is that when we get that emotional response, we're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. It's the survival brain. It's the amygdala. It's this little almond-shaped part of the brain in the total limbic system. That part of the brain has no memory of time. As a result of that, when you start to experience something that has familiarity of things that have happened before, I believe it's like gets really big. And then we go into that state of the fire alarm, everything's on fire. But it's actually that moment when we can say, okay, brain, it's okay. Because what we want to do is we want to get up to that prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's the problem solver, the decision maker, the rational part of our brain. If we stay stuck in the reptilian brain with all that emotion going on because someone's just done something to upset me, we go into that spiral. And so it's important to understand, what are those hooks that get you? For me, it's where I feel stupid, or I feel like I'm being judged or rejected or criticized or left out. There's lots of ways that cause us to have this reaction. When you start to feel that physiological moment, that's when you get to practice step 1, which I call create choice. So when you're in the reptilian brain, you have no choice because you're in survival mode. You go into high alert, run and hide, leave the company, whatever. But it's at that exact moment where if you don't process that emotion going inside your body, you will continue to deal with all the issues related to that spiral down. And so the way you process emotion is through sound, movement, and breath. And there's lots of somatic practices out there. There's a wonderful author named Kelly. She wrote a book on trauma. I don't know why I'm forgetting her last name, but she has something called, I think it's called the healing menu that you can go onto her website. She's got several different practices. For me, sound, movement, and breath is to basically all you need to do is stand in a room and jump up and down and yell at the top of your voice to get the emotion out when you're feeling afraid. Just go somewhere, move. One time I was actually doing somersaults on the floor because my body it was all this emotion going on. And then using your voice. I love using my voice, yelling, screaming. I don't typically swear, but I often, if I'm processing emotion, if I'm upset about something, I may swear. But just beating your fist on a pillow or screaming into a pillow so you're not upsetting anybody. But that sound, movement, and breath, processing of that emotion out of your body is really the first step. Otherwise, you have no choice. You go into fight, flight, or freeze. And what you want to do is you want to have a choice about how you're going to handle the situation as a next step. So create choice. That's really the getting the emotion out of your body. Step 2 is called elevate action. My old behavior, the spiral down, is do everything I can to please this person. Work my butt off as a perfectionist and make sure everything is perfect and work 12 hours a day and on weekends and never take a break. That was my old response system to try to create safety and predictability. Now, in the moment, after I've processed that emotion, I could say, okay, well, what am I going to do to elevate my action? And every situation's different. So one, for example, I was getting ready to do a presentation of a strategy of the team that I was leading. And we were meeting ahead of time. Everybody was sharing their strategies. And one of the leaders in the room kept making comments about, we don't really have a talent strategy. He said it a couple times, and I thought, I think he thinks I don't know how to do my job. And so I started to get really activated emotionally. I was really having an emotional response. Like, I'm not good enough. Maybe he doesn't think I should be on this team. I mean, you should hear the stories racing through my head. So I was in that physiological fight, flight, or freeze. I used sound, movement, and breath to recognize the emotion in me. I released it. And then my elevated action was I took a little post-it note, a little yellow post-it note, or it was actually pink post-it note. And on the post-it note, I wrote, this is the best strategy you've ever been a part of. You have a great team. They have done a great job. And then I wrote, and you have options. If it doesn't work out, you can always leave. And I just took that little post-it note. This is, I just sat it next to me on my table when I was getting ready to do the presentation. I read over it before I gave the presentation, and I just felt completely grounded. I wasn't in that state where the anxiety for me is this fight, flight, or freeze experience. It's this intensity. But once I processed that emotion out, my elevated action, I was so clear that I was really proud of the work that the team and I had done. That if it wasn't accepted, that's okay. Maybe it can be approved. I'm sure it can be. But worst case scenario, I'm marketable. I mean, honestly, it was that simple. And then the third step is called celebrate and integrate. And this is a really key component. I share this a lot in my executive coaching sessions with folks I work with, is that once you've done something differently than how you did it before, breaking that pattern of people pleasing, perfectionism, and anxiety, when I elevated my action, and I did it differently. So I went in there. I was like in near tears before I did the 3-step process, right? We've all been there. Okay. When I did it, it was this whole idea that I am okay and I can handle anything. And when we take back responsibility for our responses, our unconscious responses, that's the act of constantly practicing. And when we celebrate it, when we do something that we enjoy, just doing something nice for yourself, this particular moment after this strategy review, I was so proud of myself. I went outside and I just stood in nature for 5 or 10 minutes. It was a summer day. I just enjoyed the blue sky. The birds were singing. I felt this nice warm breeze on my face. I just thought, good job, Susan. I mean, it was just, it really teaches us about the inner coach. My inner coach was like, "Good job, Susan." Yes. And, and that act of celebrating, doing something differently, actually doing something nice for yourself is an act of integrating it into your new neural pathways. And so every time you have a bumper car crash, it's like, oh, good, I get to practice again because I'm still having an over response to the situation. And that's the healing in the workplace is rather than dreading those conflict moments with your colleagues or boss. And I would say I don't really know if I ever looked forward to them, but I did look at them differently as learning moments rather than fear inducing stress related alcohol, etc. reactions.
Oh,
So that's the 3-step process.
I love that. And it's so simple. It's everybody should have that sticky note on their desk at work.
Great point. Elevate action and then celebrate and integrate. And you get a lot of chances to practice at work because these moments, the bumper car moments happen all the time.
Yeah. And I love that doing nice for yourself can be just as simple as going outside. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be, let's go out to happy hour and have
No.
3 drinks or something that's ultimately self-destructive. So when you were doing that you already knew this strategy.
Yeah,
I
I
would
already
assume.
created, I knew my 3-step process.
Yeah.
Funny, because when you create processes and then you start to experience what you're teaching people to do, you have to practice it yourself. And you can do this in your personal life too. I mean, I had a really pretty significant personal conflict with somebody that I thought the relationship was going to end. And I was really triggered by how they had interacted with me. And I did the releasing of the emotion. My elevated action was just to appreciate that maybe the relationship is coming to an end. It's been great, but sometimes relationships end.
Mhm.
And then in my experience with this person, I was so detached from needing to keep the relationship going and so comfortable with my plan that it was okay if the relationship ended that we actually became closer as a result of it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Now with that you're detached from the outcome, you're not like forcing something or stressing over it. And that's
Yeah.
brilliant. How
Because
did you discover this?
Well, it was through the work with Martha. I mean, as we
Okay.
were working on the book for those 2.5 years, was really thinking about how do you really help somebody navigate bumper car moments?
Yeah.
And I had a fairly lengthy description of how to do it. It wasn't as crisp as the 3 steps.
Yeah.
I actually worked with somebody, a man named Kyle Gray, who helped me articulate 3 bullets and helped me name it rapid power reclaim. And I thought, okay, this is good. And then there are ways to do rapid power reclaim when you're sitting in a meeting. You may not be able to go and scream into a pillow with the people in the room, but you ask for a break and go out and splash cold water on your face just to break the response that you're having. You could do some breathing exercises, even in the meeting. Breathe in 4 counts, hold it 4 counts, release it 4 counts, and that act alone calms the brain. I've been listening to another great book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. It's amazing. And in it, they talk about how when we are emotionally activated, it's like a cocktail of adrenaline and cortisol racing through our system. And that's what causes the anxiety and the fight, flight, or freeze response. But if you could just calm yourself through breathing, in this book, the authors, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce his name correctly. There are 3 authors, but the main one who reads it is Jim, I think it's Deathware. And he talks about when an emotion comes on, when you're upset about something happening at work, the emotions actually only last for about 90 seconds.
Mm.
And if you could take the time to process it and release it, addressing the cocktail of cortisol and adrenaline racing through your system, that's when you can get into that prefrontal cortex brain to be able to problem solve and elevate your action. So it's really interesting. The brain is such an amazing thing. I mean, everybody knows that. But when you start to understand how the different parts work and how that fight, flight, freeze response is all about protecting you, when we're little.
Yeah.
For me, I am, it was like walking on eggshells every day. It was like, okay, when's he going to blow? We never knew.
Mhm.
And sometimes he could be incredibly loving. And, he was a brilliantly, amazingly smart, worldly man. There's so many great things about him. But he had this hair trigger temper that was really frightening. But yeah, it is and all these gifts came because of, writing down Nancy's story so many years ago. Isn't that incredible?
That is so incredible. That it's like a legacy that she's living through this work,
She is. Yep.
sharing that. That's just, yeah, it is this really how these things play out in life.
It's not. I know it.
Yeah.
It's a wonder we can make it along.
Isn't it though? Yeah. It's funny, my mom's name was Nancy too.
Really?
And yeah. And while I was caring for her, I also was writing everything down because I was just like, I don't want to forget any of this. It's really important. And I have not finished writing a book yet, but I know that there's a book in me that will eventually make its way out into the world. And you talked about this moment where she was like seeing God. Um,
Yeah.
it just comes to my mind because when my mom was probably about 2 weeks out, it took like 3 months from diagnosis to her passing from pancreatic cancer.
No.
And and it was all during COVID. She passed on April 30th of 2020. So those 10 weeks leading up to that, we were in Los Angeles taking care of her. And anyway, there was this one night where my daughter was with me too, and she was sitting out on the back steps of my mom's house. And we're not really religious, but my daughter looked up in the sky and she saw this image of Jesus up in the clouds. And she was like, "Okay, wait a minute. What did I just see?" So she looked down at her phone and all of a sudden, like, the lyrics were, like, showing in Spotify, and it said something about coming to take the pain away, and she looked back up, and Jesus was still there.
Oh my gosh, you're giving me chills.
Oh, and she came in and she's like, "Mom, something just happened." I have chills too when I'm retelling this, and so we went to my mom and we told her, and my mom was not really speaking very much at that point, a little bit. But when we told her, she also had this fear of going to hell for various reasons. I mean, that was a big part of her religion was,
Right.
the
Right.
fear and brimstone and whatnot. But when we told her this, and she was worried for our souls too. But
Yeah.
when we told her, she just got the most peaceful, like her whole countenance just changed.
Yep.
And yeah, you can't explain that stuff, but it was God. We all felt that presence. Even my dad. I remember we all gathered around her hospital bedroom that was in the living room, and we all just held hands. And there weren't that many moments like that because my dad, same hair trigger temper kind of thing. I mean, there were moments right up to her death where he was still yelling at her. But again, the scary hair trigger temper that was, yeah, I like to say our floor was paved with eggshells, when I was
Yeah.
growing. And I mean, that was still him, and he didn't really have a way to cope with the fact that his wife was dying, so when his emotions would come out, they would always come out as anger, and he's deceased now too, he died a year later, but I do also have all this compassion, which is another hidden gift. I have this forgiveness and this compassion for that because I know they were doing the best that they could, but yeah, there are these luminous moments when death is happening because it depends how it happens, but it can be a very sacred experience,
Yes.
where
Well,
it's
yep.
between worlds and you all were between worlds with your sister while she went through this release and
Yeah,
just incredible.
the room almost felt golden. I don't know how to explain it. My mom's memory, and I have a vague memory of this, was that Nancy was literally reaching up and then took her last breath. And
Yeah.
it was very holy. I felt very blessed in that moment for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. What a gift. Yeah, I have to read your book. And I
Me?
sure coulda used it when I was working. I mean, you think about how a moment like that could hijack you for, like,
Oh,
hours, days, weeks, your whole life if you're not aware. The
yes.
awareness is so important, and especially to be able to have that awareness in that key moment.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, too many people are in that unconscious state. I certainly was, and I almost didn't publish the books.
Really?
Oh, yeah, goodness for Martha. I was afraid of judgment personally and professionally.
Mhm.
Martha found an ad of a woman named Celine DaCosta. She was doing a 101 90-minute story clarity intensive, which I had no idea what that was. Um, but in it, she was amazing. She's been my personal coach now for 5 years because she's so good. She's a master coach. But in the with her, she helped me realize I was afraid my dad's widow was going to sue me if I wrote the story. I was afraid family members would be disgusted with me for sharing that because I've actually just started talking about this. This is only the second time on a podcast I've shared the details. It's obviously in the book, but I was also afraid of professional judgment that maybe as I shared that I didn't feel like I was good enough, all these things that I was alcoholic and recovering alcoholic, et cetera, that my company may not want me. And I had all this fear.
Sure. Yeah.
Lean helped me realize that my purpose for writing the book was way bigger than my fear.
Mhm.
And my purpose was all about helping to wake people up at work. That a lot of times the experiences that we're having that feel detrimental to our own well-being are honestly being fueled from things from our past, given so many of us came from dysfunctional childhoods.
Mhm.
And even people who had loving, wonderful, amazing parents tell me, I didn't feel like I measured up. I never felt like I was enough. Whatever it was, that they also had some of the same experiences of their beliefs about themselves. But the book, and I love it that you're sharing it with your audience, is really intended to help people realize they can step onto that conscious healing curve at any time.
When you share your vulnerability like that, that makes you that much more accessible to people. And
Yeah.
did you experience any
Yeah.
of those fears? You did.
Yeah, no, actually none of them. I mean, I was really pleased the company that I was working for before I retired was very supportive. I mean, I did my keynote talk with thousands of people at the company. I call it when your past gets in the way of your future.
Oh, that's so good.
So many audiences. It was just wonderful to have the support of my CEO and the company that I worked for.
Well, that's such a great message. If you have a message on your heart that you want to get out to the world and you've got those fears, then I think that happens especially to writers all the time. It's like, well, should I change the names? Who's going to get mad? Am I going to, is my family ever going to speak to me again?
Yep.
And all of that.
Yep.
That's legit. I think it holds a lot of us back and lets our past get in the way of our future. And I've been taking notes because it's dropping so many gems on us today. Are you still speaking?
Yeah. Yep. I retired from the corporate world last March after a wonderful career. And I'm doing part-time consulting. I do HR consulting and executive coaching and keynote speaking. And I love it. I love my clients. I love the work I'm doing, and it doesn't feel like work.
That's the best thing. When work doesn't feel like work, you'll never work a day in your life. Yeah.
Well,
Oh my gosh. Well, Susan, thank you. I'm gonna make sure that we have everything in the show notes for people how to get in touch with you. I just so appreciate you coming on the podcast today. And before we wrap up, is there anything else, any kind of parting words you'd like to leave us with?
No, I love what you're doing with your podcast, The Gifts of Loss. I mean, it really changes the game for the grief that we experience when we lose our loved ones and focusing on all the gifts that come from grief. I think it's brilliant. I loved your TEDx talk. I hope everybody goes and listens to it. It's beautiful and it's inspiring. And I feel very honored that I had the opportunity to join you here today.
Well, thank you. And you know what? Your TEDx talk is really inspiring and wonderful as well. We got to watch each other give our TEDx talks. Yes. I'm so fun. Oh my gosh, it was great. So everybody needs to go out and listen to your TEDx as well. I'll put the links in the show notes to that too. All right. Well, I know you're about to go out and ride your horse. I know.
Yeah, I am. And I'm going to celebrate my sister's birthday all day. So I'm so grateful that we had this on her birthday. I still can't believe how that worked out.
I know. That's amazing. That's what happened. All right. Well, have a wonderful weekend.
Yep, and safe travels to you. I know you're heading out for some trip this afternoon. So
All right, Susan. Take care.
thanks, Julie.